Welcome to the Follow the Leaders podcast, where we get a glimpse into the minds and lives of exceptional leaders and hear about their experiences, insights, and strategies for success. On today's episode, we'll hear from one heart-centered, effective leader and hear about their wisdom and perspective. So get ready to follow along. Welcome back to the show. We are in for a treat today. I'm lucky to have so many awesome guests on the show, but I especially love talking to local entrepreneurs here in Madison, Wisconsin. Today, I'm joined by Molly Fish, who owns Lake City Books, an independent bookstore right in the heart of downtown Madison. Molly is a fellow alum of the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Go Badgers. I have to say that every time I talk to someone who went to UW. She graduated from UW with a degree in international and global studies. Molly's career has taken some interesting turns, and I'm excited to learn more about what led her to this point. Molly is also the co-host of Book Pop, a podcast about books and reading. Congratulations on all of your success and impact, Molly, and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So, all right, we have so many things that I want to talk to you about, but I would love to start with just kind of today. Could you tell me about what your current work situation is? Obviously, you own Lake City. What does that mean? What happens there? And yeah, fill us in on your current work these days.
I feel like I am living the dream. I'm literally living my dream, which is to own my own bookstore, to get to come hang out here every day. I never thought that I would have a job where it doesn't feel like a job.
Oh.
It feels like I am excited to go there every day. I'm thinking about it. It just is like a natural part of my life more than it is like, I gotta go clock into the job at 9 a.m. or 8 a.m. or whatever. And I remember for so long working jobs where I was like living for the weekend, living for my next vacation, and just like always trying to get as much time off as possible. And I do not feel that way. In fact, usually my employees are like, get out of here. Like, it's not even your day that you're supposed to be here. But I'm like, but I just wanted to come hang out because I love it here. And I have created a space that I love. I think other people love it too, but it is just like the pinnacle of what I wanted my day-to-day life to be too. And I try to really remember that because a year and a half into owning the store, which is where we are now, it's almost easy to like take that for granted, just to be like, yeah, this is life. And I still have good days and bad days. But the first 6 months, I think I was so elated. I was on this like sugar high the whole time where I couldn't stop smiling all day. I would go home and be like, I can't believe this is my life. I can't believe that I have this store and that I get to do this all the time. I love everything about it, to be honest. So sorry if this is going to be not a super fun podcast in that I'm just like gushing all the time.
No, but gosh away. Are you kidding? You are in good company with our listenership. We're all in it for the heart.
Yeah, I really do try to channel that gratitude and remember like, oh yeah, this is exactly what I always wanted. And it is living up to the hype.
That's amazing. Okay, so the bookshop is so much more. I was looking online and there's so much that happens there that besides selling books, there's so much you have. It's like a whole world. And so can you fill us in on what is your bookshop? What separates it? What makes it unique? And then what happens in your space on a regular basis?
Absolutely. So Lake City Books is right in the heart of downtown Madison. We are steps away from the Capitol Square, which is also right by the Children's Museum, which is a very popular site for any family visiting or just families that live in Madison. And we are really I think, downtown hub for fun book events. Like we have local authors, but we also have private, you can just rent out the space at night and come have your book club there or come have your birthday party. The way I describe the energy here and why I always just come hang out here even on my days off is it's so positive and bright. And it's not like one of those quiet hush tones bookstores where you feel like you have to like tiptoe around and it's kind of like dark and dusty, which is also like, that's a vibe. And sometimes you want that in a bookstore, but we always have like indie music playing and it's bright and colorful. And there's like kids running around and laughing or like parents reading to their kids in the corner. There's groups of friends giggling and like passing around books that they love. The farmers market weekends, so Saturday mornings, are so fun because there's people like carrying giant plants and bouquets of flowers and bags of fresh produce overflowing and walking through the bookstore. And then they have a stack of books and it's just very idyllic, I would say. But to me, it's the vibes. It's like just it's like a bustling and really positive space where people are just always, we're talking about books, we're talking about what we just read, even on like quieter times. So like maybe the middle of a weekday, it's a little bit quieter. There's maybe a couple people in here, but then they will start talking to each other randomly, or like we'll talk to one and then someone else goes, oh my God, I just heard you were talking about this book and I want to talk about it. So it's a place for making connections and talking about books and the love of books.
That's so great. A couple things. One, we'll link it in the show notes, but we spoke to the people who put on the farmers market, the team that runs it. So we'll also link that episode in the show notes, and you can do a 2-for-1, visit the farmers market and the bookshop and get the whole Madison vibe.
Love that.
But secondly, I was going to ask this a little bit later, but this is a perfect time to ask this. Your space that you're in already has such good female entrepreneur juju. It was previously an event space that was owned by another local female entrepreneur. And you even have a mural painted by Emily Balsley, who is a very well-known muralist here in Madison, who's just an awesome person. And so those things alone just sort of tell me that the energy there, the vibe there is so special.
Absolutely. Sarah from Revel, I talked to her before I even rented the space because I just like cold called her and was like, hey, I'm thinking about renting this space. And I thought I would just check in. And she was really welcoming and kind. And we had a bunch of email chains back and forth. She even mailed me some of the spare keys that she had to the mailbox. So she was really helpful and kind. And I even still have up some of the wall decorations that she had left. So like they had painted one of the back walls, which is now in my children's section, has like these really pretty speckle paint, because, they were a crafting and paint event company. So It was really creative, like some of the ways that they decorated the spaces. So I got to keep some of those little details. The bathrooms were painted really wild, bright colors. So I still have one of her gold bathroom I love. And I just like touched up a little and decorated. So she definitely really still has an impact on the space. And Emily Balsley, as you said, the muralist who created our big Lake City Books mural. And then this is her font that she created for us of Lake City Books. And we use that in all of our branding, which of course I purchased from her. But I just really love the community of women and entrepreneurs and people in Madison where we just all help each other. I've never asked anyone a question or for help, or specifically a woman in Madison in business, and not been met with total graciousness and as much help as they had time and willingness to give. Like I have been really blown away by that.
I could not echo that sentiment more. I'm 11 years into business ownership, and that has been my experience at every pass. I don't know whether it's Madison or whether it's just the women here or whatever it is, but the female entrepreneurship community is so strong and supportive of each other in such a generous, abundance mindset way. So I love to hear that you've experienced that as well. It makes a huge difference in the experience of opening and running a business.
It does. And it must be something in the water. I don't know what it is either. I was like, is it Madison? Is it women? Is it some combo?
I think probably a combo. It's the lakes.
It's the lakes. Lake City.
Lake City. That's right. Well, I love it. Okay. And then let's chat quickly about your podcast too. So you have a podcast. Tell us about that. Who should listen? What will they find? All of that.
Yes. Book Pop is our podcast, which is all about books and reading and about Madison and book events in Madison. So if you are a reader and you live in the Madison area, you should be listening to Book Pop. We talk about what we're reading. So it's me and then my manager, also named Jamie. So I'm very used to doing a podcast with Jamie. Only Jamies. Those are the only people I do podcasts with. So you qualify.
Amazing.
But we talk about what we're reading, what we are talking to customers about, what we're recommending, what's like new and hot, what the trends are in the Midwest and in Madison in particular. We also give some background, like, what was the best seller of the summer for Lake City Books, some backroom details and like behind the scenes stuff with running a bookstore. So I think people might like that if they listen to your podcast, because we do talk about the business side a little bit of running a bookstore and what we're working on. We also talk about like where we went to happy hour on last Friday, or some of our favorite restaurants or new restaurants. So we do kind of hit some overall Madison topics and just like talk about our lives. We have guests like local authors. We're going to be talking with Jane Rotunda, who is the director of the Wisconsin Book Festival. And they're doing the really big fall festival in October. So she's coming on next week And we're going to interview her about the fall festival and talk about a book that we all read that the author is coming to the festival. So you also get to know about Madison book events. It's very fun. It's a light podcast. We're chatty, we swear, but mostly it's just about books and how much we love them, and we talk about them all the time.
I love it. Well, it sounds like similar to Follow the Leaders, your podcast is a little love letter to Madison.
Absolutely.
I love it. That's awesome. Very cool. I have one more question about the actual bookstore, and then I'd love to just start to talk about your path here. So Lake City Books is an independent bookstore. Besides the obvious that you are the owner and we can look at you and you can talk to us, could you just get really simple with us about what the difference is between an independent bookstore and, let's say, a major chain that we also have in town here? What is an independent bookstore? I guess that's a really simple question, but
it's a great question, actually. And I think not enough people think about that or interrogate that or even consider it in their buying habits. So there are a lot of statistics out there that I don't want to butcher by trying to come up with at the top of my head, but I will say that an independent bookstore is defined as locally owned and usually only like 1 or 2 locations and owned by people who are local, such that any money you spend is creating jobs locally. And all of the money here, like I pay taxes in Wisconsin, for example. So all of your tax money goes to a local business instead of a chain where they might not pay taxes here, right? So a lot of it is just about keeping your dollars where you live. That means everything goes back into the community. I buy all my groceries here. All of my staff live here and have kids in the school districts here. And then every penny that I make stays in Madison, right? That's where we're spending all of our money. So large chains, or if you buy from online chains like Amazon, I would say is the obvious retailer where they actually sell books at a loss just to get you to come to their website to buy other things. And so people will say, well, I can get this for $10 cheaper on Amazon. And I'm like, yeah, but that $10 goes directly into your community and it helps create this space. They also, like, the experience of clicking a button on Amazon and having a book shipped to you is nothing like the experience of like being in Lake City Books and talking to people and getting recommendations and having fun and discovering something new that's recommended to you by other local people, right? So a little bit of what you're paying for is that experience and that space, that safe space for kids and teens to come hang out and get excited about reading also, which is not going to happen on Amazon.com. So right. I think that is part of, that's the big argument for shopping locally is your money stays here. It supports local people. And you are also helping create this environment, this really positive addition to the community and supporting that so that can stay here and so that future generations will also learn to love books and it won't just be some dying industry, which it kind of did for a while. And now indie bookstores are really bouncing back. We're seeing a really big resurgence. I think the pandemic created some awareness for people. They had more time to sit at home and really think about, where am I going to buy my books? They wanted to read more, A. And B, when they were like, well, I'm hearing that my local bookstore, which can't be open to people, there, I could go pick up my book there. I could go for a walk, pick it up. And they really thought harder about like, oh, those stores are going to close if I don't help them. So I think we've seen a big resurgence post-pandemic of new indie bookstores like myself opening, which there's a little more awareness now in the community that we should be supporting these local institutions and helping them grow rather than just looking for the cheapest possible option, which is not going to help our community.
Okay, thank you. That makes total sense. And I appreciate the breakdown.
Yeah, my pleasure.
All right. I would love to talk about your path to this point. So I know, I was reading more about you and your career, and it seems like it's really bounced between 2 categories. One, bookstores, like run deep in your past. And then also you spent a long chunk of time working for a major healthcare tech company. And so I'm curious, how does this all fit together? Does it all fit together? Fill us in on kind of how you got from point A to point B.
Yeah, it feels like it comes full circle. One of my first non-food service jobs, because when we're in high school and middle school, we all worked like at little food service jobs. I worked at Michael's Frozen Custard on the east side of Madison. Great job for a high schooler. But when I went to UW Madison, I got a job at the university bookstore, which is right on the library mall. And I was working back then, they had a general books department. So it was like actually a bookstore in there. At this point, they just have like the basement textbooks, and then they have essentially Badger apparel. But back then, they had a really big general bookstore section. So I worked in there, and then I worked at the customer service desk. And that was my first bookstore job. And I got to read when it was slow. I got to sort books and move them around. And there were some really great people there. Actually, my manager, when I worked there, this was 18 years ago or something, she still comes and shops at my bookstore now, which is like really fun and full circle
really
for me.
sweet.
So shout out to Laura.
Yeah.
So it's still a community of like people who I remember working with from that first bookstore job. After UW, I moved to Chicago. And I did not have a plan, but I got a job at a bookstore since I had bookstore experience at a college bookstore. And within like 6 months, I was the assistant manager, just kind of like running everything, because that's kind of my style to get into it a little bit. Is I'm like the person on the group project that's just going to take charge. I'm the person that if I see something that needs to get done, I just do it, or I create a plan to do it. And I talk about how we need to get it done. I'm also a ask forgiveness, not permission person, and just like, let's just go. What's the worst that's going to happen? So I think my do itness, what really helped me become invaluable to that little bookstore, which mostly had employed college students. And I was like a grad. So I had more time to give. I had more energy to put into that. And I was managing people there. I was, like a 23-year-old managing 20-year-olds. But I felt like there was this huge difference for some reason. And I was like, why is this? Am I that different from these? Like, we're almost the same age, but I just was, in terms of business, I've always had this thing, this drive to look for efficiencies and to figure it out and to get stuff done. And I really got to cut my teeth there. And they let a 23-year-old just kind of like push forward. I created a textbook rental program for their company.
Cool.
Because
I was ahead of your that time.
Yeah, that was like a thing again that was happening back in the early 2000s, where nobody was really doing rentals. And so I was like, I really think we could do this. And they had 8 different stores in Chicago, and they actually rolled out my program to all 8 stores once we piloted it. So I felt like I was making such an impact on this really family-owned business as a 23-year-old. And I was working there for a while, but I kind of like, okay, now I'm running like this one store. But again, with a family-owned business, like there's only so high you can go if you're not a member of the family.
Right.
And I was now in my mid-20s and feeling like I need to do something bigger. I have all these ideas. At that point, I was already thinking I want to own a business, because I could see what running one looks like. I could see this family that had been successful creating this big chain of bookstores. They were college bookstores, but I felt the spark there. So I applied to business school, and I also applied to Epic. And I was like just trying to figure out what I wanted to do. I got into business school, and then I also got accepted to Epic. And I was like, okay, now I have a choice to make. Do I want to go spend a bunch of money and take a step backwards, but learn really how to run a business? Or do I want to just keep working and earning money and learning on the job, as it were, right? So I took the job at Epic, spoiler alert. But luckily, they really have a lot of resources there, including classes that you can take for free through the UW Business School.
Oh, cool.
So I was like, I feel like I got the best of both worlds. I took a lot of leadership courses through UW, and you do those at night. And then I also did a couple of programs through the SBDC, the Small Business Development Center, which I highly recommend to anyone thinking about owning a business or curious about owning a business. They have really great programming with the SBDC. And I've worked with them a lot on a lot of different, just random small projects, just attending and going to their events. I always get something out of it. So I got to also get then the on the job growth and training of, I'm still managing people. I'm managing large computer software projects, and also having to communicate at a really high level, giving presentations to 1,000 people in a room. There are also classes just on like PowerPoint and Excel, right? Like they really at Epic give you a mini education, because they have a lot of 22-year-olds, 23-year-olds coming there who aren't going to have that experience. So they know they have to invest in those people and help them grow. So you get a lot of opportunities. And I took advantage of those opportunities because I knew my end goal was to go do my own thing, but I wanted to learn as much as possible. And I did end up staying there for over 8 years because I was getting a lot out of it. And also I was saving money to start my own business, which was an important piece of business that also anyone who knows you need some startup capital. So I was like, well, okay, I'll just start saving. And yeah, I ended up staying a lot longer than I expected.
That's really cool. Okay, so now we're in, was it 2020 when you made the move away from
Yes,
Epic? And so there was a return to the bookstore world.
there was. So I had the itch. I already was ready to leave. It was March 2020, which we all know what was about to happen. And I had an end date with Epic. I was like, yep, I'm leaving. I'm going to go figure something else out. And I was going to take the summer off to write a business plan, figure it out. But then before I left, the pandemic hit and I was like, could I
Wow.
please stay and keep my health care and maybe we like just see what happens with this? So I ended up staying through the end of 2020. But what happened in the meantime was I met the owner of Leopold's Books Bar Cafe on Regent Street. Madison people probably know that spot. It's a
Yep,
hot spot.
absolutely. Yeah.
And he was opening this, but his opening timeline was getting delayed by the pandemic as well. He is a restaurateur and he's a interior designer and he had that whole vision for that space. But what he didn't have was really a retail background, like that bookstore part. But he knew he wanted a bookstore to be part of it. And he's like, very erudite, very well read, and wanted to have this kind of crazy idea of organizing all the books by location, like where they take place. So that was all his idea, but he needed someone to implement that. And I was like, great news. I am looking to get back into books and I'm looking to get out of my job. So he hired me to open that little bookstore and do the ordering, do the research behind all those sections, set up publisher accounts, do all of the business end of opening the bookstore, and really help execute his vision there, which gave me great experience of doing that with a safety net of, it's someone else's and I don't have to put the startup capital into it, right?
Hmm.
We always say we both got a lot out of that relationship of like, I created this thing for him. I got a lot of experience. He didn't have to go learn all of that when he was already trying to start a new restaurant and do all the other work there. So we partnered on that. And then once I did it, I was like, okay, well, that was pretty easy and fun. And now I want to go execute my own vision. Plus, at the same time, A Room of One's Own, which is one of the big indie bookstores in Madison. It's been open since the 70s, and they were moving because of downtown development displacing them from State Street. They were moving over to the east side on Atwood Avenue. So I was like, okay, I helped open this bookstore on Regent Street. Room of One's Own is moving over to the east side. There's now this hole in downtown Madison for bookstores. When I was growing up in the 90s in Madison, there were so many bookstores downtown. And I knew that even if A Room of One's Own were still here, it can support multiple bookstores down here. There's so many people walking around. The foot traffic here is so great that I was like, this is it. Like, this is the time. Someone's going to open a bookstore in downtown Madison. Like, businesses are opening again in downtown. I want that to be me. So I wrote up a business plan as quick as I could. I kind of scraped together my funding and was just like, we're going to go. I found the Revel space and they had moved out earlier that year. They had kind of stopped doing events because of the pandemic, but they still had their lease and had maybe done a couple events. But then by early 2023, they were totally out. So it was just vacant. And I was like, I think this is it. I could afford a good rent because it's basement level or like garden level. And so it wasn't as in high demand as like a place on State Street where the rents are still just atrocious. It all kind of came together. It just, as soon as I made the decision, I was churning on it for a while of what I wanted to do. And then I just was like, I found the space. I figured out the name and the concept. And then I just went for it. And between that time of deciding I'm going to do it and opening the store, it was 6 months. So it went very quickly.
Wow. Wow. Oh, I love that so much. It's so interesting how many of us in small business ownership that you can look and be like, oh, these are really distinct steps, but really they all intertwine, right? When you're talking about the leadership experience that you got at Epic and the classes that you took while you were there, and then the resources that you used in the Madison community. Another one I'll shout out is the Law and Entrepreneurship Clinic through UW Madison. And then there's also a Business and Entrepreneurship Clinic through the UW Madison where you can be paired as a client of these clinics, and they are graduate students that are supervised by professionals. So anyway, that's another resource in town for people starting businesses. But returning to kind of your path, like it feels like you just kept taking steps in the right direction that felt true to you and as the next step. And then once the moment came, the roller skates were on. And that's just a story that I hear over and over and over. Like when the stars align, it just everything flows. Thank you for breaking down your story, because it's so, like, on one hand so familiar and on the other hand so unique. And that's what I love about a business story, is that each one is different, but also like we all
Right.
kind of follow the same path of like just continuing to follow what's the next right thing for us.
But isn't it interesting too? Because like, okay, I look back on it and like I can describe it in the way I just did, and it feels like, okay, those steps all really did make sense and felt like the right thing. But each of those decisions was also really hard in the
So
moment.
true. Yep.
Right. And so
Yes.
like at the time I had it felt like, oh my God, I'm gonna quit my job to go open a little tiny bookstore for someone else that I don't even own. I'm gonna quit my like big, healthcare software
Stable.
job
Yes.
with
Right.
my
Yeah.
healthcare and my 401k. I'm giving all of that up. Like that was a crazy decision, but it did feel like the right thing. And there have been a lot of those gut decisions that like don't sound great, but then they do end up being the right thing. And it has all led me here and I'm very grateful, but I do try to also, it's almost like, oh yeah, looking back, it was all so easy. Like, no, 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 it was so hard. Like that six
Totally.
months of between when I decided to leave Leopold's and to get my store open, I got shingles from stress during that 6 months.
Oh.
You can cut that out if it's
No, it's
TMI,
no, it's
but
literally
I
real. Yeah.
literally was in urgent care and I had to get tested. It was on my face and they thought I was going to go blind in one eye
Oh my
from
God.
shingles. That's like the level of stress that I was putting myself under. So it's really hard at the time and it still is so much work.
Yeah.
But I do feel like if you're listening to your gut and if you are saying like, this feels like the right thing, and you push in that direction, that it's the right thing in the long run. But yeah, it's hard in the moment.
Totally. And I love the way you said push in that direction, because that is what it is. In some ways, it isn't like there is going to be this totally clear path ahead of you. And you're going to be like, yes, I know for sure this is going to work out. I mean, we never ever do in business ownership know if something is going to work out. But I love the way you described like push in that direction, because you sometimes just have to move into it and trust that if you have to tweak the plan from there, you will have the skills and you will have the gumption to do it. I mean, like you were talking about, that this has always been the way your brain has worked. You were the
Yep.
one on the group project that just could quickly like come up with your list of next steps, and you didn't know if that was the right path either at that time, but you just kind of have that confidence. This is the personality that succeeds in business, because you're willing to stand on the precipice and just like jump, trusting that you'll fly, but there's no guarantee. And so I'm glad you shared the shingle story, because it is not all glossy, right? It's not all rosy. It's not right. Like things are going to not work out, or things are going to change, and you're going to have to just know you can, like you said, push through it and push into it and keep going. So I love your whole story. That's really great and important for people to hear.
The other thing I really like to think about is everything is figure outable.
Love it.
I
Yep.
love that phrase. And I think that's the same kind of thing you were just saying of like, yeah, it's not going to be smooth. It's not going to be perfect. But like, if you have the confidence to know that everything is figure outable and that you have the confidence to reach out for help and to ask people for help when you need it and to create a community and to delegate and to, I think if you can, it is figure outable. Everything is. And it may be the figuring out is like, I figured out that I can't do business this way anymore and I have to pivot or I have to
Totally.
close this store and move. Like, I'm not saying you will make it a success the way that it is, but you will be able to pivot and you will be able to figure it out in that you can figure out how to keep moving forward. You can just always figure something out. And I feel like that is also the piece of confidence in the back of my head.
Well, we can shout out to Maria Forleo for that everything is figure outable phrase. I think she has a book called that, speaking of books. Yeah, it's so true. And I think it is so important for people that are aspiring to open businesses or take a big leadership step. Business ownership is not for everyone, right? Like it isn't, but it is for the people that believe that everything is figure outable. It is for the people that are willing to just get messy and go and trust that you will figure it out one way or another or ask for help. And I think that's a perfect tie-in to kind of what you were saying earlier about, especially in Madison, the female entrepreneurship community and the entrepreneurship community in general has so many resources and people are willing to help. But I think your story and my story, business-wise, are very similar in that women entrepreneurs have helped us from the beginning. And then in turn, we nurture our communities in that same way. And so we kind of band together to figure it out together. And whether that's just camaraderie or commiseration or whatever it is, or resources or connection. And I appreciate you kind of getting into it about your story. So if we think about all the combination of all of the things that you've done, if you could go back to, well, let's see. So if you opened in the beginning of 2023, the end of 2022, and tell yourself of that time, like November 2022, if you could give yourself a message from that time with the wisdom and experience that you have now, what would you tell Molly of that moment?
That's such a good question. And
it doesn't have to be rosy either.
Right?
It's just whatever it is. Yeah.
Well, I do think part of the struggle before I opened, like when I was signing the lease and you're putting all of your money into this thing that you don't even know, you can't even picture it yet. Like it's not, I had just rented the space and it was a bare bones, I had to reinstall lighting. I literally couldn't fully picture the bookstore. I had a vision, but just getting to reality, I was like, what is that going to look like? I remember even the first day we opened, I was so freaked out that there were going to be people in there. Like I'd been spending 4 months in this space, like perfecting it and setting it up. But I was like, but this is like mine. It's like your home. Like you're then inviting someone into your home, but it's not anymore. As soon as you open, and I think I heard this from a bookstore entrepreneur that I took some classes with, where they said, like, as soon as you open, the bookstore isn't yours anymore. It's the people's. It's the community now. And I felt that flip, and it was very uncomfortable at first. Another thing that I think makes a good business owner is like, I am a kind of a control freak. And I have, I have my stuff together and I have my plans, and I am like, oh, it's a little tough just to like let this open to people for their children to grab whatever and their dogs to sniff whatever. And you're like, great, okay, this is yours now, I guess. I've made this thing for you. And so there was this moment when I first started of like, I couldn't even picture it. And at each step, I was like, I feel like I can't picture the next step. And that was scary. It felt like I didn't know, what if I don't like it anymore? What if I don't like it once it's not just me in this beautiful space and I'm creating it by myself? And then once people were in, I was like, oh, it's so great. Like, this is so much better to be sharing it with people and for them to love it and to come back and to have regulars that I talk to and I know their story and their families. I know what they like to read. And then there was another next step of hiring staff. And I was scared about that too, because I was like, well, I know how to do everything correctly. And you know what other people don't do is everything the way I want it to do. They're not me. So that was a really scary step too, where I was like, well, I can't picture not being here every minute that we're open. But in order to grow, you have to take those scary steps. So I feel like if I were talking to that late 2022 Molly, who was just signing the lease and didn't have the keys yet and was scared out of her mind, but excited and as ready as you're going to be, because who's ever ready for anything, I think I would just say, like, maybe enjoy these periods, because they're all going to go away and it's going to keep growing and changing into something. I feel like it's almost like motherhood, and I'm not a mother. Just like, but to me, it's like, it's where people are like, enjoy your child at this age, because it's going to go so fast and they're going to be different. And it's always something new and exciting, but they're changing all the time. And that's how I feel about this business. And I've been so scared at each step, but now I'm feeling like the scary stuff, it's kind of fun now, because I feel more confident that it's not just like going to be the step that kills me or the step that like puts me out of business, right? Because now I have this baseline of, I've seen these other successful steps. At first, I didn't have any of that baseline. I didn't know that any of it would be successful. So now I'm like, no, I've done these scary growth steps before and they've all worked out. we figured it out, right? Like, yeah, my staff doesn't do everything exactly the way I want. And then they've also had really great ideas that I never would have thought of.
Totally.
So I need to embrace that and be excited about it. Like when we started the podcast, I was like, how is this gonna, like, I think this is a cool idea. I'm really excited about it. I don't really know what it's going to be like. I don't really know how it's going to fit into my schedule and into my business. And like now it's one of my favorite things that we do. And it's like my favorite part of the day. So I think accepting that that growth is going to happen and that it's both scary, like, and you can't force it. You have to, again, just let it come naturally and follow your gut and then be able to enjoy those periods rather than like stressing yourself out so much that you get shingles. Like I really can't tell you how much I regret that. So I wish that I had just been able to enjoy it more. And like I said, I was elated. So much of just first opening, I was so excited. I couldn't believe it. I felt like I was pinching myself, but I feel like that feeling also made me not able to take in the moment, like, cause I was so like on cloud nine and kind of disconnected from it all, like flying above my body. Like, I can't believe I'm doing this. And I wish I'd kind of been more grounded and been able to like really appreciate it. But I mean, it's good for me to say that out loud right now. And I can go for the rest of today and be appreciative in my store and be thinking about where I'm at and just be grateful. And now I really do look forward to those new growth points. I'm thinking about them strategically rather than just like letting them happen or, you know, freaking out about them. I'm like, okay, well, let's plan for them. You know, we're going to start shipping orders across the country, for example, which is something we did this fall. And when we were rolling that out, I was like, this is a big growth step. I don't know how this is going to go, but I was much more excited about it than I was about previous growth steps. I was more like, this is exciting. Let's continue to get exposure across the country. Let's open up our market. Now, people who listen to the podcast and don't live in Madison, they can order books from us that they hear us talk about, and we can offer them shipping deals. We can continue to grow those things together. So anyway, I guess the short version is don't be so scared. Or like, it's okay to be scared, but enjoy it. And don't forget to look around and enjoy where you're at, because it's all going to change. It's going to keep changing. It's going to hopefully keep getting better, but it's never going to be like this anymore again.
Yep, totally. Well, you'll have to forgive me the like book cliche, but you have built up your library of experiences that show you that you can take those scary steps and that they will add to your life and your work and your business. And so it's easier once you have that bookshelf full to say like, okay, the next one will also add in some way. And so that's really awesome. And also I was thinking when you were talking about, you know, the moment that you will both opened your doors and let the space become shared and your team and let that space become shared. I am probably going to butcher this, but I think it was Into the Wild where he said happiness is only real when shared, something like that.
Yes.
Because entrepreneurship, whether you're opening a bookstore or starting a new program or starting a podcast or whatever it is, can be isolating, and you can go also, we also like to be in our minds. And so it's tempting in some ways to just begin your own bubble. And then you're in control. But when you open it up and let other people's ideas and energy and vibration and, you know, skills and talents and perspectives, it just enriches the whole thing. So that's a big thing I'm working on in my life this year is like getting out of my isolation bubble, even though I do collaborate with a lot of people on my programs, just even sharing space with people more. It's just improved my life so much. So I totally resonated with what you described completely. Yeah.
And that's been one of the biggest surprises for me too, because that's not a happiness is best when shared, but it's not like necessarily something that I have ever thought about in my life. And I am such a lone wolf. And like you said, we like to be in our minds. It's safe in there. And we have a lot of good ideas in there. So it's like, why do I need anyone else's contributions? Like, this is all I need. But then as soon as you do push yourself out, like the biggest surprise to me was how much I enjoyed having staff here and having Jamie, who's now almost full time and is the producer and co-host of our podcast and is like so important to me here. And I was like, I can't even imagine it without her. And before I couldn't imagine ever having someone like that. So I do think like being open to letting other people in. This is now like a relationship podcast. Letting people in will increase your happiness. you don't know who you're going to find. Like, you don't know what
Yes.
collaboration is going to be the one that is like, oh my God, this is
Yes.
like a lifetime partnership, or this is like a huge
Completely.
deal to me and it's going to change my life.
Completely. I mean, I'm currently my office here is shared with one of my collaborators for my summer camp and after school program. And, we met it in a professional development group that I run for moms that own businesses. And over the years, we've partnered on a few events, and then we threw a noodle at the wall, and this was this summer camp idea, and now it's a massive part of our lives and our businesses, and we share an office space together. And there's been other ones that were like fun ideas and cool things to try that didn't end up going the same direction as this, and they were still valuable. And then your parenting example was so accurate. So I have 3 kids and they're all teenagers right now, and people always told me like, yeah, hold on to the moments because they go fast and then they're gone. But the reality is that, like, yes, that is true. I can look back at those like toddler pictures and want to like kiss those toes again. But each new step brings its own new abundance of joyful progress. And I have like fallen in love with each new stage, even though I have like feared the ending of the stage that we're in. So it's really a very appropriate comparison there, because it is exactly like that. It's like, yes, oh, hold on to this, and each stage has its difficult parts, and then you get out of it and you're like, oh, remember that, you were so cute and little. Like
I know.
each of these new stages. I mean, my oldest is 17. We're talking about college next year. Like, what the heck, how did that happen? But like, I again, back to the library example, like I have this library of experiences with parenting so far to know that, like, yes, while I will be so sad that some things are ending, like I'm so freaking excited for what is next, both for her and for our relationship. And so it's a good example. You did good with that one. So,
As a non-parent, I'm always like, I don't mean to tell you your business, but I feel like my bookstore is basically my baby, and it's a year and a half old.
yeah.
I have a little toddler.
You do. In fact, so for my kids, I own a kids yoga program called Little Ohm Big Ohm, and for many years, I mean, even still, sometimes when I put up the birthday posts each year, I like compare it to the stage of child that it
Yeah.
is, right? So I remember doing some pictures when my baby business was 18 months old, and I was like, oh, it's a toddler, right? Like it's learned, it's walking stable enough, but sometimes,
Yeah.
like
Figuring things out.
figuring things out, learning new things. Yeah, exactly. Oh, I love it. That's very cool. So, we talked about community and the people that build us up along the way. Is there anybody that you could shout out who believed in your ability to lead, maybe even before you did, or gave you, a next step that really led you here?
I would have to say my parents, and specifically my mom. Both of my parents have always been so supportive of me and all of the weird decisions I made, following my own gut, even when they didn't get it. I think they knew me enough to say she's following her gut and is on her own path, and it's not the path that we might have chosen for her, but they knew me well enough to just be supportive of me anyway. And they were the biggest proponents of me being able to start my own business, being like, you can do this. And they kind of were confused at any of my being scared. They were like, how do you not see the library of skills that you have built up as you're talking about? I feel like that library was maybe behind me on a wall, and they're looking at me and they see all of that. And they're like, look at all you have done. Of course you can start your own business. Whereas I'm looking forward off of this cliff into the unknown, being like, I don't know if I can do this. And it feels so much scarier in the moment, but they were the ones that really were like, of course you can do this. And I think their casual belief in me, almost of like, what are you talking about? Like, why aren't you're going to kill it. It's going to be great. Really just helped me look past all of those fears and the scariness, and helped push through. My mom was here with me in the store. Like, so before we opened it to the community, when I say like, oh, it was just me here, really it was me and my mom.
Oh,
And she
I
was,
love it.
yeah,
Oh.
she was like on her hands and knees, scraping flecks of paint from Revel off of the floor. She was scraping glitter out of the cracks of the cement in the floor, while I was like, running around freaking out, installing bookshelves, painting the walls, ordering my cash wrap, researching books. She was just quietly cleaning and there to support me through that whole time. And that was also part of like, I was like, oh, it's like ours. Like, I was like, this space that we have literally scrubbed and like know every inch of it's like not going to be ours anymore. And she'll still come in now and be like, your floors are dirty.
Thanks, Mom.
And I'm like, thanks, Mom. You're right.
Yeah.
I haven't like mopped that corner in a minute because like it's a bookstore. You don't have to do a lot of mopping, but you do have to kind of, people like spill a little coffee or something. And so she keeps me on my toes and makes sure the store is clean. But she was really there with me through that whole thing. And my dad was absolutely there too. And he basically works a job here. Once a week, he comes and like takes all of our recycling to the recycling plant. Because you get a lot of boxes for a bookstore, and we don't have in our location like a recycling dumpster or any kind of alley. We just have to take everything out the front door. So he will come do that for me like clockwork every week. He is doing like removal and taking whatever I need. They are unbelievably supportive. So obviously I wouldn't be the person I am today in general, but I think they're also why I have all these skills that I have. And the independence, the knowledge, the examples of really highly successful people who have also lived happy lives, and just, their support in general has been incredible. So they're the ones.
Shout out Mom and Dad. You rock.
Shout out Mom and Dad.
I love it. All right. I have a couple final wrap-up questions for you. Is there one tool or technique or strategy that you use to stay organized, balancing all of the things that you do, whether it's like a tech thing or a paper tool? Just a little tidbit for our listeners who also are juggling a lot of things.
I use QuickBooks, which I love and found to be really easy. So just in terms of financials, I'm kind of like a nerd about financial reporting and really staying on top of all of that. And I really like QuickBooks. We have like a lot of bookstore specific tools that I don't know if they would apply to general pop entrepreneurs, but I will say I use like my Google Calendar, Google Sheets, Google Drive, all of those resources. Like I have everything digitized and organized in folders. I keep everything on my calendar. So then I have it on my phone, on my computer. I know exactly what I'm doing every day for the next 4 months, right? Like it's all in there. If someone's like, hey, can you do that for me on Friday? I go put it in my calendar immediately. And that has been my technique my whole life through all of these careers, is if I keep a really clean calendar, I never forget things. I never drop balls. Even if it's just like a reminder, if I'm laying awake at night and thinking like about 3 things I want to do tomorrow, and I'm like, oh, I'm worried I'm going to forget them, I go put them in my calendar as things I want to do, and I block off time for them on my calendar. So that's always been my organizational technique of like how to stay on top of everything, put it in a calendar, and I'll even schedule like gym or, go have lunch or eat dinner just to kind of show myself I can reserve time for myself, but it has kept me sane for sure.
Awesome. Okay. And my last question for you is, if you had a day off, totally off, you could buy no books, you could sell no books, you could not organize anything, you could get nothing done that's productive either for your personal life or for your business. What is one activity that you would do on this day off, and one place you'd go to get something to eat?
I feel like it's kind of cheating, but I would read. I love to read.
Okay.
Unfortunately, reading is also now part of my job because like I read a book and then I can talk about the book and I can sell the book. But I still just enjoy it, and it's still the thing I want to do most of the time. I love to read.
Okay.
Going to get something to eat. There's so many good options. What do I want to shout out? I know. I feel like I'm going to have like recency bias and just say somewhere I went, but I will give a shout out to also our podcast, where I think I did like a whole episode on Mint Mark, the new Mint Mark location, because we went there, and then I went again like 2 weeks later because I was like, I can't believe how good it was. Maybe it was a fluke. And then we went again and I was like, oh no, it's so good. So Mint Mark has a new location on East Wash. It's so much bigger than it used to be. And it is just fabulous. It's small plates. It's a lot of different cuisines, just like American food, but it's so elevated and everything is unbelievably delicious. And the setting is really beautiful now. They have like a huge patio that overlooks like the river and the park. That's where I would go. That's definitely where I would go. I'd go to Mint Mark.
Well, I am wishing that day for you very soon of reading or patio time and Mint Mark. That sounds excellent. Molly, where can the listeners find out more about you? Where's the best place for them to go to get links to everything, your podcast, your bookshop, everything like that?
LakeCityBooks.com. That is the best place to go. We've got links to the podcast. We've got About Us, where you can read more about my story and our opening. You can shop for books. You can book your like next book club at Lake City Books right on the website there. So that's where I would go to check it out.
Awesome. Well, we will link everything in the show notes. Thank you so much for chatting with me. I loved our conversation. It was inspiring and you're amazing and such an awesome resource for our community. And I'm excited to see all the things that you're going to do next because there's going to be many other leaps that you take. I just know it. I know you will. Thank you for being here. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you, Jamie. This was really great.
And to all the listeners, thank you for listening. We'll be back next time with another inspiring conversation. Follow the Leaders is produced by Lit Path Studios and music is by Shane Ivers. You can hear more about this show and all the other podcasts at Lit Path Studios by going to www.litpathstudios.com.